Okay, everybody, thank you guys for joining us and welcome to the Brand.bar Happy Hour chat. I am excited to be joined by Ron Jackson and his lovely wife, Diana. Let me tell you a little bit about Ron. Ron is the editor and publisher of the domain industry's news magazine, dnjournal.com, which he created after recognizing the industry's need for a news outlet. He has been working in the domain space since 2002, but registered his first domain in 1997. Before domains, Ron worked in the radio TV industry for 20 years and owned and operated a series of successful record stores. Ron, I was thinking that maybe you could introduce us to your wife.
I would be happy to do that. My lovely wife, Diana. Diana and I celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary last summer. And I think the way we met is kind of an interesting story. We actually had met the first time without I didn't really kind of know it. It was like an event to raise some funds for Junior Women's Club, I believe, that Diana was involved in. And we were both models in a show. A runway show wearing tennis apparel, I guess it was. So different people were in and out of that. So we didn't meet there or talk there, but it was, I don't know how many, a few months after that, or was it longer than that when we ran into each other in a mall in Sarasota?
Oh, that was considerably some time after that. You'd already moved to
that's
Tampa.
Right. I'd already moved to a different station in Tampa, but was back in Sarasota visiting.
And when I met him the first time, I was married.
Really?
So when we met in the mall, it was like just, oh, hi, how are you?
Yes.
Nice to see you again, and how do you like Tampa?
And I had nothing to do with her not being married. I probably should have said
That's right.
You sure you didn't leave an impression?
It's kind of funny because I was with a friend when she came up in the mall and said, "Oh, you're Ron Jackson." We'd actually met once, but she knew me from TV. And so I thought she was a really attractive woman. So I said, "Yeah, I wonder if this girl's married." So in the course of the conversation, I said, "Well, what does your husband do?" And hoping she would say, "Oh, I'm not married." But she proceeded to tell me what he does. And so I said, "Well, nice seeing you. And we better be moving on down the way." But I had moved, as I said, to Tampa to work for a CBS station, which is only about an hour north of Sarasota. So a lot of my friends were still in Sarasota. So I would go back there every couple of months. So I went back a few months after that and was with the same friend that I was with when we saw her in the mall. We were at a local restaurant there in Sarasota. I don't know what the odds are that this would happen, but same city, but a totally different place. At that point in time, we're in that restaurant, and Diana walks in. And she goes, with a girlfriend. And she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, well, I certainly do. What's new with you?" And she goes, "Well, I'm not married anymore." And I said,
that was it.
I said, that's the perfect, you talk about an
Oh, yeah.
That's the perfect. So we started seeing each other from that point on, and we're married really not too long after that.
Wow. So it was meant to be, basically.
But as for that's just the start there. As far as an introduction, to tell you more about Diana, though, I was attracted to not only is she obviously a lovely woman, but she has infinite patience, which is great. If every woman knows that, you've got a lot of patience. That
yeah.
And she also is very talented. She's an artist. If anyone's seen her artwork, she's a phenomenal artist. And we just hit it off and had a lot of things in common. So. I could say a lot more things about her, but your hour would be gone just like that.
I would just like to add that we have a daughter together too. I had 2 children already when we were married. My son was 10 and my daughter was 18. And then we had a daughter of our own when I was 41 years old. She is now about to begin her 3rd year residency in internal medicine. And actually just found out she's been named a chief resident.
Oh, that's exciting. Congratulations.
Very proud parents.
And we're happy that should lower our medical bills at old age. We'll get some of that investment back.
Yeah, I'm relieved she didn't become a pediatrician like she talked about first, because then she wouldn't have been able to help me much.
Well, it's good to have a doctor in the family. Congratulations to that. I know it speaks highly of you guys as parents, and also congratulations on celebrating 30 years this past summer. I guess for us to get started, I was going to ask Ron if you would tell us how you came across domaining. You know, the domain industry. Where did that start? Because I know your background was in radio, TV.
Yeah, well, the way that happened, I had done, I was a television reporter, as I said, and I was in that field till the late 1980s. I had actually started as a radio DJ when I was a teenager. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to have my own record store. So about a year before I left television, I started a record store in Tampa. I would work at the TV station, and then when the news was over, I would go to the record store. And Diana also worked in that first store. We started in the late 80s. And the timing was really perfect because that was the time when CDs came in and people were replacing vinyl libraries with CDs. So it was a great business to jump into, and we had a great run in that for about a dozen years. But then right around 2000, the internet came along with, a lot of people will remember Napster, where you could download all kinds of music free. At the same time, CD burning came in. So kids, instead of coming in and buying, all of them coming in and buying a CD, one would buy a CD and then they would burn 20 copies. So essentially that just all across America, it wiped out all of the independent record stores, including us. So we were in a situation around 2000 where that business had been wiped out. A little before it was wiped out, and I saw the handwriting on the wall. We both had an interest in antiques, so we had also opened an antique store in a shopping center right across the street from where the record store was. And Diana is very knowledgeable in that field. So we thought we would transition as we saw one going down and maybe catch an up wave with antiques. But we made a major mistake in that the neighborhood we lived in, Tampa, was all yuppies who were all into modern furnishings. They had no interest in antiques. South Tampa was the big antique area. And I wasn't smart enough to figure out that, all the antique stores are in South Tampa. I'm thinking that means we have it all to ourselves in North Tampa. But there was a reason no one was on the north side, which we quickly found out. So then we were in a situation where we had to close both stores because neither one was working, and I had to start all over again. So then I'm kind of casting around thinking, geez, what can I do now? And I started, the one thing that stuck in my mind as the music store started going down was the one element that was still working was the website that I put up in 1997, about 3 years before we closed the store. And I was so impressed that that website let us reach a global audience and sell our merchandise all over the world, not just in Tampa. And it was very inexpensive to do it. So I figured, well, the internet killed us. Anything that I do in the future, I decided it had to be internet related. So still not knowing what I was going to do, I saw an article in a magazine about the .us registry opening up that extension to all American citizens. Originally, that was reserved for government use and schools could use it. But when it opened up to all the citizens, I looked at that and said, I don't know what I want to do, but I remember in 97 how hard it had been to, even then, to get a really good .com domain for my business. So I thought, I'll pick some ideas that I might want to build a website on, and started registering a few of those domains, not realizing you could sell a domain as that being the asset. To me, it was something I could build a business on. So I registered a few of those, and in the course of researching ideas for possible businesses, somewhere along the line I stumbled upon dnforum.com, which a teenager in Virginia had started. And I go to this and visit it the first time, and people like Donna Mahoney were already in there, and they were talking about buying and selling the names themselves. And to me, that was like a eureka moment, because having been a journalist, I always loved language, obviously, but the idea that you could own a word on the internet and buy and sell that, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So I made the mistake that a lot of newcomers did and jumped in and immediately started buying all kinds of names, not knowing what made a good name and what made a bad one. So I registered a lot of just horrific names and couldn't sell any of them. And meanwhile, Diana is getting very nervous at this point because we've closed both of our businesses. Our incomes basically had disappeared. She went back to work. She hadn't worked outside of the home. That's 17 years I was in broadcasting. But when we got in that situation, she jumped in. I actually went to work, took a job as a communications director for 1 year with an internet company. Nothing anyone would know today, but it was based in Tampa. So we're kind of struggling there. And she has a story from those days when we had, I think, one line of credit left, and I was using all of it to buy domain names. So I think maybe I'll
Yeah,
look
tell
at
us.
that up.
So my favorite story is I'm talking to my younger sister and I go, I don't know. I think he might have totally lost it now. But we have one little credit card. We have no money, and he's buying something called domain name. So I said, my quandary is, do I jump out now, or am I going to be okay with living in a cardboard box under a
Oh my
bridge
goodness.
somewhere? So, but obviously I chose the bridge, so, and cardboard box. So, and now, thank goodness that's the decision I made. Yes, everything worked out
That's
for
good.
us.
I'm glad. I was about to ask you that. How did you explain, this to your wife? Like, what did you say when you decided you were going to give it a try?
Well, I told her the money, I was actually a bank robber, and that's where the money came from. So that kind of relieved her to know that the money was coming from a different source. Now, actually, it's very difficult, as anyone who's in the business knows, to explain that to friends and relatives what you do. The analogy that everyone, I think, keeps coming back to, and I still don't know that I've ever come across a better one, is that it's very similar to real estate on the internet. The biggest difference is that every domain name is unique. Unlike houses like in our neighborhood, they're similar, but domain names, it's kind of a whole different thing, and they aren't nearly as liquid as real estate either. But the basic concept, it's an address, just like real world
Hmm.
real estate, and the extension can be comparable to location, like being on the beach with a .com or investing out in the suburbs in a new GTLD or something like that. So I don't know that she found it difficult to grasp. I think what concerned her more was whether it was really going to be a viable way to make income, or if I was just wasting my time and the little money that we had left at that time.
My problem was I understood it, but what I hated, especially my last job, people would come and say to me, "What does your husband do?" And I go, I can tell you, but when I'm done, you won't have any idea." So that goes through my brain. So so you're trying to tell somebody that doesn't understand
Yeah.
anything about it. I mean, sometimes it's so surprising you can't believe it. I met a lady that uh, taught a computer class and had no idea that you could buy names and park them and make money
Oh
on them.
wow.
It was a total surprise to her, and she was teaching
Oh
the
wow.
class.
You can imagine people's reaction when she told them I could tell you,
Yeah,
but
but
you
you wouldn't
wouldn't understand.
understand.
So right away they think, oh, drug dealer.
Oh, so they'll be like, "Wow, what? I wonder what
So
he's."
I mean, I would try to tell them that it's like, you go
Well,
to
did you finally?
something.com, look for something on the internet, and that has to have a
Yeah,
name.
I was gonna ask. Did you
Yeah.
finally, I guess, give yourself a title? I mean, when someone asks you now, what do you say? Do you say I'm an online entrepreneur? Do you say, oh, I buy and sell domain names? What do you call yourself?
Well, now, over the years, DN Journal became the primary business, even more so than buying and selling
Mhm.
domain names, which is what I came in to do. I didn't come in to do a publication. I only did that when I discovered there was nothing there and there was a need for it. Back in those days, when that's all I did, I think I tried to explain that I was a domain investor, which is still a term I like better than domainer.
Yeah.
No one, that to a lot of people, it doesn't sound like a professional term, so I tend to use domain investor more. The people who are more advanced are like domain investor developers. And I guess I did become a developer in that I did DN Journal. I'd really like to do other things, but development is so time consuming to do it right. And on any topic, there's so many competitors that you have out there. So it's something you have to really want to devote your heart and soul to, I think they have much of a chance to succeed at it. I still have an interest in that area. I'm doing something else maybe someday, but for the time being, being journal is always been.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, and this is probably, I'm sure this answer will vary from person to person, but when were you convinced? Cheers! I've got my ginger ale here. Everyone's
We
sick at
figured
my house.
it was going to be a happy hour, and then we might as well
Exactly, this
go
is
with the
happy
theme.
hour.
Otherwise, I love an excuse to have a glass of red wine in the afternoon. I never do.
So, I'm wondering, when were you convinced that you had a real, I guess, firm career opportunity here? Like you were no longer testing the waters, but this was something that was going to be permanent in your life, that was going to work out. And I guess, was there a milestone moment?
There is one that I can identify. I actually was doing it full time um, before the moment that it really became worth doing full time because I just loved it so much. And in my life, to me, the most important thing in life has always been to do something that you love to do. So that's always been number one. If I had enough money to pay rent and have food, I was always pretty happy because I always did something I loved to do. And I think that goes back to my childhood. I had a father who was a blue collar worker, very smart guy, but he didn't have much formal education, and he worked in a factory. And he hated going to that factory every day because he just found it not challenging at all, and you're just basically a human part of a machine. So he used to say when I was a kid that he couldn't wait till he could retire so he wouldn't have to do that anymore. And I thought that was so sad that here was a guy, a healthy, strong, smart guy in his 30s back then who couldn't wait to be old so he didn't have to do that anymore. So from the time I was 10 or 11, I said, no matter what I do in this life, I'm only going to do things that I love to do. And I've always gone with that. There have been ups and downs that any entrepreneur has, but I've always been happy, and that's the important thing. So to answer your question, DN Journal went online New Year's Day 2003, and it was just a hobby to start with. I was starting to make a little money buying and selling domains. Diana was working and was very patient in seeing me build this thing up. Once I learned what made a good domain, started selling some. Initially with DN Journal, that first year, just a few advertisers came on, enough for me to be able to devote about a quarter of my time to it, and the rest of the time still researching domains, drop lists, buying and selling. Within another year, about enough new advertisers came on, it became about 50% of my time. Then it went to 75. And the real moment where that became a full-time business was January of 2006, when traffic went to Silicon Valley for their first show. And the domain business was really exploding then. And going to Silicon Valley brought a lot of new and really high-rolling tech people in there. And so many new advertisers came on board just from that traffic conference. It was unbelievable. So then I knew DN Journal was a full-time business, and there was enough support to allow me to do that. And so it kind of flipped the tables where now I still did the domains, but much less time with that. So that's when it kind of became a career. The odd thing being that the career wasn't what I started out to do. It was in being back in journalism, which I never intended to do, rather than in the buying and selling. Though the buying and selling created nice revenue streams. And one thing Rick Schwartz always said is that the key is to build multiple revenue streams. Parking or monetization, however you can monetize a domain, leasing it, lead generation, whatever. Buying and selling is another one. Developing a site, maybe it's an e-commerce site or maybe it's a blog. If you have these different revenue streams, then you're insulated from a lot of ups and downs. And that happened in the recession, when the recession was taking everything down with it, and we lost some advertising, but I was still selling some domain names. So we kind of got through a really nasty period in American economic history in pretty good shape, thanks to having built a lot of different revenue streams.
That's a smart move. I guess that was going to take me into my next question. You're really good. You throw the segues right out here at me. I was going to ask, I guess, if you were to be speaking to a new domainer like myself, a new domain investor, I'd say, and they were, I guess, tossing up this idea, deciding, should I do this full time? I mean, part time? Should I do it full time? I mean, not everyone can leave their careers for this business, but some people will feel that call, I guess. Some people will want to. What would you say? What would you tell them to consider or to think about first, or is it just going to be a gut feeling type of thing?
Yeah, I think the toughest thing for a lot of people who work for someone to make that break and be on their own is covering their health insurance costs. Because if you don't have an employer covering, that was the biggest net we had to consider being able
That
to
was
track.
one of my main reasons for going and taking a full-time job,
Right.
is somewhere that would provide health care for our families. So.
Yeah, so with Diana working up till 2006, when I was telling you everything really broke open for us, we were on her health insurance. Finally, by 06, we could afford our own, but we were paying $1,200 a month for an insurance policy or something. It was insane. So that's a big consideration. So I mean, you have to have a passion for things, but you also have to have there's a practical element too. You've got to be able to cover the basics. So I think most people are better off transitioning into it, spending, and that's what I did too initially, was spend the extra hours that I had at night doing these things until you learn the ropes, because there is a steeper learning curve with domains than a lot of people realize. A lot of people think, oh, that's so easy. I'll just go register a few of these names and then I'll sell them for 10 times what I paid. But you have to learn, and it's to me, it's almost like going to college, at least for a couple of years. There's that much to learn about how to do it and not lose everything you have. And all of us have seen a lot of people come and go in the field through the years who didn't take the time to research, go to conferences, read blogs, go to forums, make connections. If you don't lay that groundwork, then your chances of succeeding are much, much poorer.
Oh, I happen to agree. I had to unmute myself. I don't know if you guys, my children wanted to make an appearance, I guess. So I had to take my own advice from the beginning of the show and throw the mute on for myself just now. But I happen to agree with you. I do know I made a lot of the rookie mistakes myself. I came on, actually, I found out about the industry from stumbling upon a book called Get Rich Click by Mark Ostrowski. I was in the UPS store and I saw it and I was like, what is this book? It kept calling to me. So I picked it up and I read it and I was like, this is my answer. I can try something online. But I didn't read enough because I came in and you talked about registering terrible names. I'm not sure if yours were terrible. Mine weren't even domains. Mine were sentences. I didn't read anything. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
you have to figure if you can sell words.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What? I mean, hey, this covers everything. So I agree with you. It's best, I would say personally, if it were me talking to someone, hey, read everything you can. In fact, someone asked me on Facebook today, how do I get into this business? I said, hey, have you purchased anything yet? They said no, they hadn't. I said, that's good. You're already 10 steps ahead of all of us. Read first. Read everything you can before you actually start spending your money. Okay, so
Absolutely.
yeah, so I was going to ask Miss Diana to tell us if you were speaking to, I'd say, a spouse or a family member or someone's friend who's has a spouse or friend who's getting into the business, and they're like, I don't know if this is a good idea, or they're confused as to what it is. What would you tell them as a spouse yourself who's gone through this journey? What would you say?
Um, I I like the idea of just moving in slowly. I think helping me understand what he was doing, because I had no knowledge. Instead of just shuffling me to the side, we could sit down and discuss what it was and what his goals were and stuff. I think the biggest thing is you somewhere have to have faith in your mate that they are up for the challenge. What you have to look at your finances. What can you afford to do? What can you risk? Uh, George Hung, who just did the same thing, had a very hard time convincing his wife that he should give up his really well-paying job and go out on his own. And it has turned out to be the best thing in the world for him, because he speaks Chinese and he has all these new China extensions and all these new purchases in China, and he's happier and making much more money than he did working for somebody else. I think you just have to look at the people that have been able to make it a success,
Yeah,
and just not be too afraid. I mean, that's life. Not everybody is going to succeed,
that's true.
so you may just have to take that risk. Are you willing to do
Yeah,
that?
I think that's really good advice, is to look at other people, get to know other people who have been successful at it, because they've already been there and done what you want to do. That's one thing. One reason I've always been such a huge advocate of going to conferences. We wouldn't have met you if you hadn't come to NamesCon in January, and you make so many connections in that one space. And people are much more likely to connect with you if
that's
they meet
right.
you in person, because you get so many. I'll get dozens of emails a day from people I don't know, and some could be very worth while taking your time to do, but you're much less likely to do it unless you've already made that connection. Oh, I know who this is. I understand where you're
Yeah,
coming from. So that's a really big deal. The other thing about it's so difficult for people who have a job to take the risk, but having been through 3 separate careers, having done broadcasting and retail and now domains, and also having worked for others along the way, people say, well, I can't take the risk of becoming an entrepreneur. You're working for an
that's
entrepreneur
right.
job, and several businesses that I worked through went under because they're entrepreneurs and their business
Hmm.
failed. So you're always going to have risks, even if you're working for someone else. So I finally came to the conclusion when I left TV that and again, this was because that was a once extremely powerful television station that went down, and no one ever foresaw that coming. So I thought, if I'm going to take the risk, I'd rather invest in myself. At least I always know what's going on, and I'm in control of it. So I, firmly believe in the entrepreneurial lifestyle if you have that mindset, and I don't think you can have a fear of taking that on, because there's no guarantee that your job's going to be there
That's
tomorrow either.
right. Hmm.
The other thing that I would recommend a spouse doing is, if they're interested in this, is take your spouse to one of the conventions so that they can see the excitement, so that they begin to understand things. I probably learned as much from going to the conferences and sitting in all the meetings as I did talking to him. There were always new things and new terminology and everything. Besides the fact that I just love going because you get great with people and they feel like family.
That's
And like
right.
Donna Mahoney, who was not at the last convention in Las Vegas, the one before that, where for the first time I actually got to sit down and talk to her, and you have this unbelievable bond
That's
between
right. There,
the great
That's right, because the community is still like a small community. So you have more of the opportunities to grow some really close relationships, have these tight bonds, as you said. When you, I guess, step out from behind the computer and you make the trip or you make the effort, I'd say. I really appreciate that because I was trying to, I haven't been having such a hard time explaining it to my husband. He's very intellectual. He understood what it was I wanted to do. But his family and my family are like, what? What is that?
yeah.
I think actually this past weekend, his brothers told me, we figured out your business, Angela. We realized that that domain stuff is for the elite. Most businesses don't even have domain names. So they're still trying to figure it out. And I figured, hey, I know this chat I'm having next week is going to help. They're going to be the first 2 people I send this video over to. But I guess in the meantime, I'm going to open this up to see if anyone who's in the audience with us, if they have any questions for us. Let's see here. Oops, I lost something. Uh-oh. Let me see if I can get everything back. Well, you guys can see it, right? Okay.
Everything looks good.
I'm sorry, you guys. Forgive me. I'm still working with these new tools. So, you know, Just bear with me through my growing pains here. Let's see. Let's see who we have with us and if they want to ask any questions. Oh, good. We have a full room here. And let me unmute these mics. Hey there, Chris. Chris joined us. You know, Chris brought his wife to NamesCon in January. Hey, Jason. Now, you guys, we are still on recording too. I'd love to see you on camera, but I just want you to know that we are still recording. And I'm going to unmute everyone. And if anyone has a question, I guess now is a good time. Unless you're bringing in a lot of feedback, I might have to mute you again. Let's see. Let's see if I can find that source.
Can you hear me?
Okay, who has a question? Jason has a question.
I have a question. Yeah, when registering domain names or drops, do you use estibot.com for valuations for that? What would you use to get a good gauge on buying a good domain name, you know, like with the research and stuff, knowing that it's a fairly good name?
You mentioned Estibot, in other words, someone that gives you like an automated appraisal.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in appraisals, especially automated ones, but in general, really not in many of them at all. There are a lot of people that will sell you an appraisal. At least Estibot, I believe, is free. But a lot of people will sell them to you, but there's no way. There are too many variables, and it's too illiquid a market for anyone, I think, to be doing anything but guessing when they try to give you an appraised value. I mean, you know that a three-letter.com, for example, is worth a lot of money, but trying to pinpoint a specific domain name, we saw a domain sell this week, car.info, for $76,000, which is really a stunning amount of money for a .info domain, especially with all the new GTLDs out. Normally, I might have thought that might sell for $10,000 or $12,000. But it all depends. How deep are the pockets of the buyer that approaches you? Most of us who are approached, it's by people who want to give you $50 for a domain name, or, you know, right around the registration fee, not understanding aftermarket values. It also depends how much do you have invested in it, how important is the domain to you, do you have any pressing bills? I mean, in every one of these negotiations, there are so many different variables. That's why Rick Schwartz, who's been very successful, had always made a point of trying to learn everything he can about the buyer. And people wonder how he keeps making these multi-million-dollar sales. So he learns who's on the other end of the deal. Sometimes it's not easy to do, but you'll be surprised how much you can find out by looking up an email address in Google or something like that. So people, when I first started, I used to ask that question in forums a lot. That was a popular thing for people to go in and say, I have this name, what do you think it's worth? And everyone tends to think their own names are worth a fortune, but no one else's, most of the others they see aren't. So it's just like you get all these crazy opinions. So I think the best thing that you can do is look at records like our weekly sales column shows you what sells every week. And that gives you an idea. It's still a rough idea because, again, you don't know what these buyers are looking for. What are they going to do with the domain? They have an idea in mind for a specific domain that maybe doesn't make any sense for you, but it works great for them. But at least you get some ideas of what certain kinds of names are selling for, how CCTLDs are doing, how the non.com GTLDs are doing. And you kind of have to arrive at a number yourself and then try to meet a mutually happy ground with the person that approaches you with the domain. But as far as I think you can just get these crazy numbers from these automated appraisals. To me, people ask me all the time to tell them what something's worth, but to me, it's just a parlor game. Even anything, and I've seen probably more sales than anybody in the business, hundreds of thousands of them that we've documented. But to me, it's still just a parlor game to try to stick a number on it and say, well, this is what you can expect to get for it. Even a three-letter.com, you could have one, a really good one, where a buyer in your lifetime never steps forward to buy that particular domain, at least at a price that even that you might consider fair market value. There's someone who will always give you $1,000 or $2,000 for one, but one you may see sell similar, you may see sell for $50,000. That doesn't mean your buyers are going to come along and pay $50,000 for it. CEDO, who's one of the biggest companies in the space, needed to get their name. They were originally operating on CEDO.us, but they wanted the .com, and someone in England had it. So they were doing everything they could to try to get this guy to sell them the domain name. They even offered to buy him a new Mercedes-Benz, and the guy turned it down. Even though it's a nice name, it's a 4-letter name, but it didn't have any value to that person compared to how important it was to a company like CEDO. So CEDO eventually wound up paying $80,000 to get the domain, and that proved to be well worth it for them because it's their brand. But no one else would have paid $80,000 for it. The guy might have been lucky to get, say, 10 for it. So you don't know, unless you know for sure who that buyer is on the other end. It's really difficult to know how much you may get out of a particular name. A lot of Rick Schwartz always says, like, it's the power of no. He just says no, no, no. But if you're selling a lot, if you've got a lot of sales like he's had, you have the luxury of being able to say no. A lot of us don't. At some point, we need to say yes because we have bills to do. But it's kind of more an art than a science. There's not data that you can totally rely on in your case. So it's just kind of a gut feeling that comes from experience, and that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure, Jason.
So I see Chris put a question up there, but there is other, I mean, because he has a lot of people asking for
Well, let me.
But there is another site that does take your name and give you an appraisal for Sherpa.
Oh, does Michael do that? Michael Seiger, she's thinking Michael Seiger may do that on the main show. Actually, I think they do a whole show.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's every week, but they do an hour. That's a good idea. I think they appraise like whole portfolios.
Or you can put your name in, and they will sometimes do an online appraisal.
And actually, now I'd forgotten about that, and it illustrates what I said. Michael usually has like 4 panelists on the show. He would have like Michael Perkins and Rick Schwartz and Paige Howe and Adam Dicker, and they could throw a name out in that session, and the 4 of those guys everyone would say all 4 of those guys are experts and they know the business as well as anyone. They could have wildly different opinions about the name.
Yeah.
So Chris had just asked, would it be tacky to ask for an appraisal here? It wouldn't be tacky. I mean, I maybe would throw a range out to you, but I would say whatever I say to you, don't take it as gospel, and you could, because it may not be, be as meaningless from me as from anybody else.
Were you going to throw a name out there, Chris? I think he's typing it. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put a name in. What I'll do is tell him 8 million, because then he will really like me, and I make a new friend. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of the appraisal companies work. They send you back a crazy high appraisal because they know you're going to like that, and you're going to come back and give them another $20 for another name. Then they're going to take all these worthless appraisals and go advertise, well, such and such said it's been appraised at $300,000, even though they couldn't sell it for $30. So a lot of the appraisal businesses, they want to sell appraisals, not necessarily help you sell a domain. So let's see, what did Chris write? Is supergoodness.com. That's a super good name without the nest on it. If supergood would be .com, I think would be a really cool name. Supergoodness, to me, it would be, it's kind of long. And again, I would look at it and I wouldn't see too much there. Supergood would be a really cool name, though. I would like that. Unfortunately, that's probably with domain names. I take all of mine. I always want to whittle a few letters off. And,
you mean like my sentences? I'd love to chop a few words off of that now.
You know what a lot of people do is, Angela specializes in brandable domains, and a lot of that business is developing a story or building a story around the domain so people can envision it. I think that's a great idea. A lot of the people who specialize in brandables will come up with a logo and attach that to the name. Now you can visualize something with it. Say, hey, wait a minute, that makes sense to me. And Donna Mahoney kind of concurred. She said, I don't care for it either. But the point is, though, that you can, I think that that's a great idea as logos and a little story could be used for this and that, and it may help.
But it doesn't mean that it's a bad name. Because
Right.
like you said, there could be someone out there and he's
Yeah.
going to put that in there and your name is going to come up and you have
That's
to
right. It could be
say
it's a subjective type of thing. Yeah.
It's like you said, parlor game. It's just as somebody else, that's what they're looking for. Those are the words they type in.
Chris mentioned there, and Chris had a reason for putting that name out. He mentioned that in his mind, there's apparently a site I'm not familiar with called superbetter.com. And he said it's really a great site. So that kind of got him thinking along those lines. And that's actually a good idea if you're trying to sell it. I mean, to bring that up. Say you've seen, or if you haven't seen superbetter.com, you could tell a potential customer, check this out. And so then you add a story to the domain. To me, it's not like a generic domain. It would be totally a brandable. So you'd be better off asking Angela for help on that one than me probably, because I tend to think more in terms of generics.
Yeah, and I have this creative spirit. That's why I love brandable so much. I love to put a story behind something. I was wondering, would I guess landing pages be what we're talking about for that then? If he has a domain that he wants to put up for sale, create a great landing page for it. He can put the story there, the logo, everything.
You can do that, or there are sites, I don't know if Brand.bar is doing it yet, but I've seen some other brandable sites that will do that for you. Some of them want a fee and they'll create a logo and feature you on the homepage.
Yeah.
But landing pages are a great
Yeah,
idea.
well,
I think most businesses, when they come up with an idea for their business first, and then they go out and see if the domain is available. So they will tend to put in the name if they
That's
have an
right.
interest in it and see what pops up. If there's already a business there, then they'll usually move on to something else because they think they're not going to sell it. So a lot of domainers haven't used landing pages as selling points because parking had always been such an important model. But we've seen a huge shift in the last few years where parking revenue has been decimated. In my case, I probably make less than 20% in parking what I did a few years ago. So it's gotten to the point for me where I'm seeing traffic to some of these domains, but they're not getting paid for any of that traffic. So if that's the case, why don't I know a certain percentage of those people, even if it's only one or two, are looking at that name because they're interested in it for a business for themselves. So I'm not getting paid anyhow. Why don't I put a lander on there and use that traffic for myself? So I have a number of landers, particularly on three-letter.us domains. I have hundreds of those on their own lander with the page. It makes a case for .us and has examples of other major corporations that use the .us. And since I did that, I've sold quite a few more than I did before because they go there and now they've got the whole case laid out, how easy it is to transfer, that we use Escrow.com, and that is all simple. So more and more domain people are now building their own landers rather than relying on parking because they're getting a better return on their money now to make us use those as sales pages.
That's a good.
And also one other tip on that point, it takes time to do a page, so I set up a template that applied to all of that category, like I'd say the three-letter category. So the template is all about that. Only thing I have to change is just the name and the price, and that's it. So that template's there, and I can pop those pages out like that. It doesn't take me that long to do hundreds once you have your base page set.
Great idea. Perfect. Was that, did you have another question, Chris, or was that it? Let's see if anyone else.
Oh, Brandon Abbey was on. He was just saying thank you for the mention. And Escrow.com has been commenting. A very long-standing relationship. We run all of our domains to them, but that's why I like to sort of kite off of their success by saying that we use them because that puts a lot of people at ease. A lot of people, when they go to buy a domain, they're very wary of who's on the other side of this transaction. Are they really going to deliver a domain. So it'd be very difficult to sell domain names without an escrow provider that people trust in between, because the internet being what it is and so many shysters out there, they want that assurance that they're going to get the domain and you're not going to get the money until you've delivered the domain. So that's a very important part of the process, and good to let people know that if you're doing land.
And it also takes you back to that whole real estate example. When you purchase a home, I mean, there's someone there in the middle. You're going to go do your closing and sign your documents, and you're going to pay your fees if you have any when you come to closing. You're not going to just go to some stranger who may have built the house, may not have built the house, hand them your money and hope that you get the keys. You're going to want to use someone that you can trust. And if people don't understand, because I think that's a point too that's being lost. Some people don't know, the process at all. So when you contact them or say they contact you for a name and you're like, yeah, I'll sell it to you, but they're then wondering, okay, am I going to get this name or not? Are they going to pay me, or you're wondering if you're going to get paid? It's good to have the middleman there. I think it's a good asset, something to add to your business to make it more professional.
I see Donna said Jason had another question. I see Jason kind of over in the corner there of our screen.
My other question is regarding the new GTLDs. What are your thoughts on that, considering when .info, .org, and .net came out, and they had a huge registers at the beginning, and then all of a sudden not as much now. What do you think about the new GTLD segments? Do you think it's going to be...
The idea of new GTLDs isn't new, of course. We went through the first round of them shortly after I came into the business. Then .info and .biz came along. And here we are a decade later, and those extensions have been successes for the registries. They've both sold a couple of million, I think, probably for both of them, if not more. So good for the registry, but you still, in going around town and any city, it's a rarity to see one in use. So that's made them harder to resell. So seeing this to me, it's kind of like seeing something I've already seen. The only difference is this time, instead of a handful, we're seeing thousands come out at once, which I think makes it even more difficult from a reseller standpoint, because now the buyer has so many different options. Having said that, I have purchased some myself. I think there are interesting opportunities more so for developers like Angela has done with Brand.bar than speculators at this point in time. But my whole thing has been to be a speculator. So the way that I approach it is with the belief that it's going to take many years for much of a market to develop, and they haven't in the past. It's only by domains that I think I could use myself. They're in fields that, particularly for me, I picked up some media domains that I really like. So if I ever want to do another project, I have them there. And you also, I think, need to approach it with the idea that you could lose 100% of your investment. So I wouldn't put any critical money in them. But the way I look at, for example, I may have 150 of them. And so let's say they average $10 each. Maybe it's $1,500. If I lost that all, it wouldn't matter. But if I did have the time to I have a lot of geo domains, a lot of media things for other ideas I have. If I utilized even one of those, and it was I had then had that perfectly descriptive name of what I wanted to do, the $1,500 I put in for all of them would be a bargain in the long run if I got that name sitting there. So, I think that that's how you have to look at it. The other thing is quality is so important, where in a .com you can go out 2 words, 3 words. If you're going to go into new GTLDs, I think you have to have really, really good, like 1-word domains and an appropriate ending. So, there are guys out there buying thousands and thousands of them as speculators. But again, it's speculation. For some people, it will pay off. For most people, it probably won't. So I would want to look at it as I said, to have a development avenue there as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. That's great knowledge.
Let me open my window here. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering if anybody sees it as a viable way to sell domains to have like sales letter style videos and do a little video where you describe what it could be used as or how many people are searching for it and things like that.
Well, my opinion, like, and again, I'm probably not really representative of most users. I don't tend to click on a lot of videos. I prefer the text format because I can zip through a story or locate things that I want much more quickly. I don't have the patience a lot of time to say to click on a 5-minute video and then try to find in there. You have no way to do a quick search through a video. But again, obviously the video is wildly successful on the internet. Diana clicks on them all the time on her iPad. So I'm probably a little old school on that, and I could see with the current generation that, particularly if you've got a catchy opening screen there, I think drawing them into it, if you have a knack for that, and I mean, I'm a guy who worked in video my whole life in television, and I used to edit video all the time, but I don't do it at all now. I prefer to work in text. But again, if you have a knack for that, I could see it working. And the other thing is that from what I've seen, you would be relatively unique in that space. I haven't seen too many people who do that. You could have like a landing page on a sales site in your video windows. And if you became known for doing very clever videos, I mean, that could be your brand, and you could build a whole brand around it. So it could certainly work. It's just like I said, I'm just probably the wrong guy there, but you could very well be onto something there.
My only suggestion would be keep it as short as possible because
Yeah.
people's attention span is very, very
That
short.
is so true.
Yeah, maybe a couple of minutes, probably at the outside of everything. When I was doing television, the stories, we would do what's called a package for the news every night, and the package was a story I would deliver done, and I would have interviews with the sports guys, talking about the event or whatever. We'd have what we call the B-roll, the action, and typically we weren't supposed to run over 1 minute and 30 seconds for the 6 p.m. newscast. Beyond that, then people will start drifting a little bit unless it's extremely compelling content. Actually, the more I think of it, the more I like the idea. I could see that working, and particularly as a way to brand yourself. There's so many sales sites out there that's very difficult for an independent sales site to draw people in because people will go to Cdo or Afternic or GoDaddy. So getting people to come to your site, you've got to have something, be able to offer them something really unique, which brings you to niches, which is to me another thing that I always tell people is find a niche that we're not in an overcrowded space and become known for that, and that would be a good example of doing that.
What's one of the most popular registries where you've actually sold domains on? Is it like Sado, Namejet, Flipper, that you've unsold?
Yeah, Cdo's been around. They were probably, them and Buy Domains that Michael Mann started were probably the first ones, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe somebody at Afternic was early. I think Afternic came along in about 2004. GoDaddy's become very big, obviously, because they've got that gigantic registrar to promote their sales platform. Frank Schilling's domain name sales has definitely been doing killer business. Typically, what I think a lot of guys do is utilize all of them. Put your name out in front of as many people as you can because you're not going to pay anything unless you make a sale anyhow. So I think that's a good idea to do that. Just put it out there everywhere that you can.
Great, no, thank you.
Okay, so I think what we'll do before we go is I really want to say thank you guys so much for coming out and chatting with us and being patient and answering all of our questions. But before I let you go, I want to mention our sponsors. The show really couldn't go on without them. We have NamesCon who's sponsoring us this year. They are currently offering a discounted early registration rate. You can save 60% off the regular ticket price for NamesCon right now. And we have been blessed with having Escrow.com as a sponsor as well. I don't know if you guys have had the chance yet, but they now have an API marketplace integration and Express Cart Buy It Now buttons, and they're very easy to use. You can actually just copy and paste the HTML code into your website or emails in some cases. So I wanted to mention that. I really appreciate you guys coming out to today's show. And, thank you so very much.
It's been our pleasure. We didn't even
Yep.
have to come out. You just sat here at the computer.
And,
This is why you do a happy hour.
So I want to say to anybody that's new that comes to the two conventions that are coming up here, the one in Fort Lauderdale,
The Domain Conference.
the Domain Conference, and
The
also
NamesCon in
NamesCon.
January 16th.
if you see us and you want to talk to us or say hi, please do that.
Yeah.